Welcome to Wear Your Cape to Work, a podcast hosted by Project Insight. We believe that project and program managers are the real superheroes of every organization. We want you to hear their stories so you can be inspired to wear your own cape to work. Today on Wear Your Cape to Work, we're excited to welcome Agatha Agbanobi, founder and principal consultant of ResonantHR. With more than 15 years in project and program management and 6 years in HR leadership, she'll share what it's like to lead initiatives in employee relations, conflict resolution, workforce development, and DEIB. Agatha, unlike so many of us, is comfortable with being around difficult situations. She uses her superpowers of value-based leadership, empathy, and people skills to help resolve conflict, build better company cultures, and connect HR initiatives to business goals. We'll be talking about the unique challenges of HR and DEIB projects, proving ROI, values-driven leadership, collaboration, and her own upcoming leadership podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today, Agatha. We are so pleased and honored to have you with us on Wear Your Cape to Work.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we are excited to have our first HR program project manager with us today, her PMP in the HR world. I wondered if you could start us off telling us a little bit about how you just entered the world of HR in the first place, and maybe describe a little bit about what your role is at ResonantHR now.
Yeah. Gosh, I like many people in the field, I never imagined that I would find myself in HR. And that's not no dig on HR. It's just there was not what I thought was in my cards. But how I fell into it is because of my value for equity. And that really was what launched my career in education, with education equity, or like I would say, equity and education reform. And so doing a lot of project and program management work in that space, started off working with USAID and nonprofits internationally, specifically in West Africa, and then came back to the States. I grew up in the States, but, spent significant time working abroad, doing this work, and then came back, taught in the classroom for a few years to get my chops, like they say, and just worked my way up into a project management, program management role again as a literacy specialist and English learner program manager. And then eventually, moved into government work, the government space. And that's when I started working at the State Department of Education in Texas, which is called the Texas Education Agency. I was a project lead for one of the commissioners for priorities at the time, which is focused on improving reading and math scores. Essentially, it was my experience there that immediately kind of told me, or gave me the motivation, I should say, to move into how to make workplaces more equitable for everyone. So I was noticing a lot of different patterns throughout my career at that point, but it kind of came to a head because I was in this very high stakes political environment. It was a highly politicized project as well. It was in the papers, reading scores in Texas have always been scrutinized. And this was all about curriculum. And so there was just a lot of debate about how much control the state should have in terms of curriculum design and the instructional materials available for public schools across the state. And so that was one piece of it. And then the other piece of it was being one of the very few women of color on my team. Very few people of color at that time at the agency. Now, it may have changed over time, but very few people of color really leading initiatives at the agency at the time. And then there were just some issues around like salary negotiation transparency. So, you hear through the grapevine, some people are allowed to negotiate while others are told they cannot negotiate their salary. Just different things across different teams. Now, different directors can say different things, right? When they bring someone on board. And then there were just other issues about transparency around benefits. So I felt as though if you didn't know the right questions to ask, if you were coming in without any real connections, you were coming in at a disadvantage, no matter how qualified you were for that role. right?
Yep.
So may not be set up well to negotiate your title and your salary enough. You may not know the right questions to ask to make sure you're set up with the right, benefits or benefit structure for yourself.
Interesting.
And so it was all of these things together. And I experienced some of these things in my previous roles too. So it wasn't just at this environment. And so all of that sort of like came to a head. And I was like, I think I need to start thinking about launching my own diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting and coaching firm. And doing that work crossed so much of HR functions. And at that time, DEIB began to sit under HR. So I had to learn so much of what HR is.
I see.
Yeah. And that was really good because then it allowed me to really understand past experiences. What was right, what was legal, what was compliant, and what was a little bit, tricky, what was a little bit not okay. Or flat out just not okay, period. And so that's how I began to broaden my scope to include conflict mediation work, conflict management for teams, compliance. What else am I doing? Employee relations work. I did a lot of audits and assessments when I first started out, focused on DEIB, and then eventually broadening that scope to eventually be HR focused. And so that's kind of how I got into it. DEIB, I started out, it was a lot of training and development and audits and assessments and coaching. And then it sort of naturally progressed into broader HR functions where I'd already built those transferable skills. And so then I just went ahead and got my certification in HR, and I'm still, getting certified in certain specific niche areas now, but it's been quite the journey. And I will say that I feel like, everything happened for a reason in the way that it did. And I'm really happy to be where I am. Like I didn't expect that HR could be, and I hated to say it this way, but I didn't expect HR could be this fun. Like it's actually really rewarding work. It's not as stuffy or as maybe you might think it is from the outside looking in. There's just so much transformative, beautiful work that can be done in HR when you're doing it right. So I'm excited to talk about the ways that we can do HR the right way in our conversation today.
That's so great. I'm seeing a theme here where you're taking some passions that you were feeling percolating all the while, and felt like you were led to this particular DEIB work and that just happened to fall under HR. Yeah. And so then you took on that HR know-how and certification. For our audience, just before we spend a lot of today talking about DEIB, I don't want to make an assumption that everyone knows what that acronym is. So could you share with us what that stands for?
Yeah, DEIB stands for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging.
I'm curious, how did you first decide to pursue your PMP certification too, that project leader and HR leader tied together?
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, Trina, because I've actually always had in the back of my mind to pursue the PMP because I've been doing project management since 2010.
The whole time.
I was, right?
Yeah.
Like leading projects in West Africa with USAID, focused on one specific region, right? Like, so I've been doing project management for over 15 years. And so I'd always thought about getting it, but I never actually, bit the bullet, like actually did it. And so I think what really sort of led me to pursue it was because I was in a workshop and it was for HR folks, individuals, and the facilitator had talked about how like we take for granted some of the skills that we build over time just from being in the role. But then also, or maybe we're not aware of those skills we're building because there's so much that we're building as we're flying, right?
Yeah,
like,
learning
when
as
you
you go.
get into a role. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is project management in the HR space. You've got to organize yourself, prioritize, think about business priorities and how to align with that. Different stakeholders. And so she was talking about how getting the PMP for her was really pivotal because it allowed her to sort of just see specifically the skills required to be a good project manager, and also then self-assess herself in terms of like, what am I currently doing? What am I doing well? And where are some of the gaps, right? And so I thought that was interesting. Even though I'd been doing that type of work for a very long time, I thought, I'm sure there are probably gaps somewhere because I haven't been technically trained yet, right?
Sure.
But 15 years of doing it, you could be like, I'm going to pass this, no problem. I got it.
Right? So I thought about that and I was like, it'd be great to just do this, go through it and do a really, really good self-assessment of myself and how well I really know how to project manage, right? And so that's really why I pursued the PMPs, because I wanted to self-assess and see, where my strengths were, what I had built over time, what comes naturally to me, and also where the gaps are, and where can I begin to, how can I begin to close those gaps?
I really appreciate that the project management work is the bookends of everything else to what you're passionate about and what you're really enjoying. How are managing HR projects different from the other work you were doing previously?
That's such a good question. Because I think in HR, you can kind of get in this bubble a little bit, this HR bubble world. And I would say it's different because the previous work that I did, I was constantly having to think about the bigger picture all the time. Like it was a non-negotiable. Like I couldn't develop a strategic priority or a goal for a project or a program without thinking about the broader organization, the different stakeholders that we currently work with as an organization. I couldn't not think about those things because all of those things were implicated in my overall project plan and scope, and how I manage change over time and the unexpected. So that was different because with HR, because it's been around for so long and there's a way to do HR that is there. I feel like, there are things that are changing now where HR is becoming a lot more strategic and not just this like service center that it's maybe traditionally been. The service and compliance center, it's now becoming this like more, I will say more explicitly a business center where HR leaders are strategic business partners. And so now there's this move towards us having that broader picture that I've had in my past experience. But there is a bit of it where you still have to be very intentional about doing that. It's like, okay, when you're thinking about your business priorities, HR should be involved in that conversation. When you're thinking about your strategic roadmap as an organization, what that implementation looks like. The CHRO should be a part of that conversation so that when the CHRO also develops a strategic plan for their department, it is a plan that feeds into, supports, or drives those broader business goals and priorities that have been put in place. So I would say that's the difference, is that it was readily part of my past jobs where I was program and project manager, right? And here it's something I have to be very intentional about making sure I'm asking those questions. Even when I look at RFPs, they don't include a strategic and HR strategic plan or an HR strategic roadmap. They just say assess, audit, and then boom, 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 start doing stuff.
Right. Well, and everybody's on the fly. We're moving really fast and projects happen so quickly at companies. And you're right. They tend to move in the way that they always move. There's like a process that just happens. And so it sounds like you're making inroads at these organizations to say, hey, you need to loop in your CHRO and bring them into this whole process so that it doesn't go that way that it seems to always go. I was going to ask something else, but I feel like we should go towards those organizational goals because, we talk to growing companies all the time, and those strategic initiatives are important to project work. And you have projects going on in HR. How do you tie those to those strategic organizational goals, especially when they don't exactly equal HR. Like not all strategic goals are, would you please hire 17 more developers? You know, whatever,
Right.
the goal is usually broader and kind of high level. How do you connect those HR and DEIB initiatives to that broader organizational goal so you don't get silos?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that's really good is the CHRO should always be reporting to, of course, it's implied, right, to be reporting to the CEO. Mm-hmm. When I work fractionally, my request is always to be reporting to the CEO or the ED. I can work collaboratively with the CHRO, but I prefer to report straight to the CEO so that there is that equal footing of having that open conversation, being able to freely bring up ideas that directly speak to the broader goals. If I'm only speaking to the CHRO in my work, I'm sort of I'm forced to sort of work within their way of working with senior leadership. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes,
right?
Very much.
Yeah,
they're the conduit to change ultimately in that instance. Yeah, no, that makes
and
sense.
it's almost they become a bit of a gatekeeper when I surface something that maybe they don't necessarily agree with that direction. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just when I think about HR leadership, I think it's leadership that should be on equal footing with the CMO, the COO, and other senior leaders within the org. So to answer your question about how do I tie it to those broader business priorities, right, or goals, I can give you an example. So I had a client who wanted to expand into markets in New York and in California specifically. And they were in the process of building out their marketing team. And so that is the goal. So let's say the business goal is we want to expand into these markets. We have these metrics that we want to meet. And I started meeting with the CMO to talk about hiring, right? So if you are building out a team focused on marketing and you want to diversify your consumer market, then we need to talk about who is front facing, who's making decisions on marketing decisions, who's driving a lot of those initiatives in a way that is culturally responsive and allows the solutions and questions that are being asked to be the right ones, because these are the folks who are coming, who have that identity, understand those consumers a lot more than maybe some of us here, right, around the table. And so the way that I did that was like, okay, great. This means that this is your broader business goal. And then this is our HR goal. Our HR goal now is to help you build out a marketing team that is diverse, or at least mirrors the desired consumer base that you want in New York and in Los Angeles is one of the cities that they wanted to expand to, but LA and other cities in California.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I make that connection is, okay, great. Here, what are your broader goals and how can HR support that in a way that allows you to have better solutions, business solutions as a whole, right? Because if you have that diverse team, like I was saying earlier, the marketing is going to speak to that consumer that you're trying to get or attract, right? Mm-hmm. And it will just be a lot less roadblocks because you have the right people there, right, to build that culture within, and then
that's easier.
Wow. Yeah,
it flows more easily. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
When you're engaged in these conversations with the leaders, how are you quantifying the ROI that they're going to see based on what the HR work that you're doing, or the inclusion work even as well, right?
Yeah, that's a tricky question because there's so many different factors that come into play in terms of the results that we see based on an HR solution that we put in place, right? So I can continue with this specific example with the marketing exec or the CMO and building out the team. We set some pretty audacious goals for the team itself. We drafted the job descriptions for the different types of ideal profiles that we wanted on the team. Once we start hiring folks, it's hard to say, it can be difficult to say that this particular goal, or saying that we increased our market by, let's say, 20% in New York, or we increased the diversity of our consumers in stores in New York, because we hired this particular marketing team member. It's hard to always make that clear delineation. We can broadly say these are one of the contributing factors, right? But it's hard to always say like this is the exact straight line, because it could and more realistically be that yes, it was the hiring of this person, but it was also their collaboration with the product manager about this particular style of boots, or the name of the shoe, right? That brings in that attraction for the consumer, right? And it was also potentially the person that was in the store. There was someone in the store that was able to connect really well with someone who normally doesn't shop there. And so this person had a great experience, and then they tell all of their friends. So I think it can be hard to have that straight line ROI when you're talking about here's what HR did to drive business solutions. But you can always be careful with be very strategic with language and say, yeah, I believe this is one of the contributing factors.
I like that.
Yeah, to getting to that ROI that we were looking for.
I do too. I think that as a business leader as well, that you're spreading out your possibilities for getting that return, right? It's not just that one direct line where if something gets cut there, good luck, you just lost that revenue channel, right? You have many different ends in that way when you're thinking so strategically. So that's that
absolutely.
And everybody can kind of let go of the tight grip of the steering wheel just a little bit. Like the strategic initiative can be a thing, and the contributing factor doesn't have to be like this data point matches this data point and we can all applaud and now you get a promotion.
It's true. And I think it's a lot of pressure, right? It's a lot of pressure. You've got to meet these numbers, and it's tied to your performance management. And so it can be a lot of pressure, but I think it's really important to try to share those accountabilities, because there's no way it's up to one person to drive the success of any one, initiative or strategic priority. It takes a team, it takes a village always, right?
Right.
And a lot of times it takes the unexpected to get us over the line.
Yeah, right. I need our audience to just kind of pause for a second. I seem to do this in each one of our episodes because I marvel at the work that you're doing in your project area at a company. Yeah. Just stop and think about, okay, Agatha's been talking about just hiring strategic people, but what about the workplace culture that you have all around you? What about different employees and their desires in their career trajectories? What about, opportunities for belonging and events and fun and, salary, and there's so much that is happening in your purview.
Yeah.
And I just gasp sometimes at the amount of work that sets before you and all HR project managers, all of us at work. We really do believe that every project leader wears their cape to work every day because someone has to accomplish these very important tasks. They might not just be little tasks, they could be huge, but they're big initiatives at companies that really keep the wheels going, the wheels on the bus. We're all moving forward in our different team roles and swimming in our lanes and doing our best work. Maybe tell us in your area, what's one project right now that it's really tapping into your strengths. It's really making you dig into your particular superpowers that you bring to your organization.
I will say probably the conflict mediation. I really love conflict and change management.
Okay, hold right there. She just said, I really love conflict and change management. We love you. That's amazing. Who loves it? That's great.
I know. Yeah. I like being thrown into the fire. As long as I'm not the one actually in it. I love being able to be thrown in it and then help people solve it. Yeah, help them solve it. Yeah. That's really what I mean by that. And So right now I'm working through a conflict mediation engagement, and it's been really enlightening. There's always something to learn every time you go into these. But I say it taps into my strengths of just people skills, the communication aspect, understanding each individual, their background, not just how they show up to work, but what they're doing outside of work that impacts how they then show up, right? So how do they spend their weekends if they're willing to share, all of those things speak more to their actual values and beliefs than what they're telling you their values and beliefs are, right? So
sure.
Yes.
Being very strategic about how you ask those questions about values and beliefs, and helping, two different folks, come to alignment about what those are for the both of them, to then begin to see a way forward, right? I think it's that aspect. It's also the aspect of being a creative problem solver,
Mm-hmm.
right? And also
Yes.
just this thing of always being open-minded to the unexpected, to the room becoming this thing that grows because both of us are in it, not just because I'm there, right? As the facilitator or someone with the knowledge, like understanding that the other person or the other people in the room are really they're bringing knowledge and new learnings to the space. And so giving that opportunity for the room to expand, because all of us are there and all of us feel as though we can equally contribute to what the solution should look like moving forward, right? It's never really just one-sided. I think the other piece is the empathy, helping to figure out what are the different points that is going to be easy for each person to jump on that empathy train wagon, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
What is it about this particular issue that can be a trigger or a signal to something, a past experience? And how can they potentially empathize with someone else who's having a different type of trigger, but the emotional and reaction and the pain is potentially very similar? And so
I'm seeing hopefulness in you. I mean, this is beyond the superpowers that you've named. You're looking ahead to a positive resolution at all times.
Always,
and to get there, you're having to employ these other superpowers that you've already named, your people skills, your empathy, your, all of them. But really, it takes a lot of oomph to always have a hopeful solution in mind. What a great mindset. Very cool.
Yeah. And I can attribute that to my faith, I think, my faith in God, because I believe that, it's really difficult in the day and age that we live in, especially. It's so easy to be very hopeless
true.
and have very little faith that things can get better.
Yeah.
Especially as you get older and the world becomes more and more demystifying.
Cynical.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think, you do have to begin to pull on different resources intentionally to have hope continuously. And for me, that's my faith, right? My faith in God and my practice and my community as well. All of those things are always helping me to look at the positive outlook for things. And so there's never a house that's burning too fast. When I say house, I mean a workplace. Burning too fast or too hot that I don't feel can be settled down and us finding some sort of resolution, even if both parties aren't happy, moving forward. But some sort of resolution that we can come to at the end is always the goal.
You are a workplace firefighter. That's cool. That's very cool.
I really appreciate just how strongly you live out your values, right? You have these sets of beliefs and you're helping others with those skills and your, thought on that to make it better, right? Put the fire out and let's rebuild together kind of thing is really great. You're launching a new podcast. Is that right?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I am. And
Yeah.
I can talk briefly about it. Do y'all want to hear a
Please.
little
Yeah.
Well,
That's
it's
why I'm
tied
asking. I
into
think
this values,
it's tied into
right?
the
Yeah.
values, right? I mean, I think that it's a really nice segue to learn a little bit about that because it's pouring out of you. You can feel it really.
Mhm.
So please share. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the podcast is called Brave Ethical Leadership. And it came about because during the past couple years, it's been difficult for me in an unprecedented way, where it has felt like my values have been under attack, and that's how it felt. I don't mean to say that that's actually what was happening, but it has felt that way, especially as it relates to creating an equitable workplace environment, right? And so we've seen the backlash on DEI or DEIB. And imagine, this is the thing that you feel is part of your purpose of being alive. Whether it was in education or now in the workplace, this was something that I was always like passionate and driven towards. And I felt like it was a human right, honestly, a universal human right? To be treated equitably at work, no matter what your identity is or your background is. But I felt this pressure in the past couple of years to be incredibly silent. I didn't know to protect myself, right? To protect myself and to keep clients, who are trying to, walk that line of, how explicit can we be in terms of DEIB anymore because of this backlash, the political turmoil that's going on within our country. And I felt upon looking back, I felt ashamed of my silence. Like I didn't know, I was silent because I didn't know what to say, but I also was very afraid. So throughout my career, it's been pretty big when I make these like decisions for the case of ethics. Like this is the right way to do things. And this is the way people should be treated. And now it felt like I didn't know what that big thing was for me to do. It felt like posting on social media wouldn't have been enough. It would have just led to a lot of cost, a lot of like
Sure.
clients and all the things that come along with that, because this is your livelihood. It's how you eat food and put a roof over your head. And then I think the other bit was I hadn't really fully conceptualized the idea of taking little action steps towards change. Because in the past, I've always done these big action steps where I left a job or I had the big, difficult conversation with a manager. And I started looking for stories of leaders who had been in difficult situations, whether similar to mine or not, but very high stakes, where it felt like there was a lot more to lose than to gain. There's a lot more to sacrifice. And I was also specifically looking for leaders whereby maybe they've taken that big action step, but they had to learn how to take those little small steps towards change because that big action step, for whatever reason, just isn't feasible or doesn't make the most sense as the right decision at the time. And so that's sort of how the idea for this podcast was born was, what are the different ways that you can be a brave ethical leader? Because we often see, like I've said before, this big dramatic thing that people do and say, okay, yeah, that's a brave ethical leader right there, right? That's bravery. Right. But what does it look like when you're in a situation for the long term and you are trying to drive change in small doses, building trust in small doses? And so that's what I'm looking forward to, is talking to different leaders who have had that experience and are willing to share some of their the tools in their toolkit. How they communicated with different stakeholders at different points in that change trajectory, how they maintained, their own mental health and their own sense of self-value without being, too changed or moved in one direction because of the environment that they're still in. So all of those complex, nuanced conversations is what I'm hoping to have on this podcast with leaders who have walked that walk.
That sounds great. I can't wait to subscribe. Honestly, I think that it's really important because I think we get stuck in that kind of rugged individualism of like, it's these big steps, it's these big things that do it, but really ethics or anything that really makes you up, it is all those little motions that then let you get to those big pieces. So
absolutely.
Yeah. I like how you called that out too, because I'm interested in listening more as well, because today's day and age of leadership, I'm seeing more of, oh, well, if you're not going to do it my way, I'm going to either force you to do it my way or we're going to quit and throw it all out.
Yeah.
You know, and what I want to see is more examples of leaders who are willing to patiently move small steps, because we're losing our capability of compromise and understanding one another and respecting someone else's position enough to patiently move slowly so that everyone can come alongside one another and feel good about those next steps. I'm speaking high level, but I think we all get it. It takes time to make a change that is a big change, and those smaller steps along the way that don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, as they say, can really teach us all a lot about the patience of change and how it doesn't have to happen overnight. What an interesting podcast this is going to be. I know there's people who are working as project managers and even not project managers who listen regularly to our podcast, who are fascinated with what you're talking about. They find themselves in workplaces where they have to do the same thing, right? It's not just for, the leader of the company. It's for project leaders and just an individual contributor who can say, look, I feel strongly about this. I think it's important. I've been, stewing on it, learning about it, resonating with it. And I want to take small steps to make a difference in my workplace. And maybe there's steps that people don't even realize are happening. The ones that you look back a year from now and you're like, oh, you did get taller, or we did change. It's definitely a different change over time. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that perspective to us today. We are so glad that you could be here with us and talk about what projects are like in HR and with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we loved hearing about your journey into those things. I think a lot of our audience can resonate with, I never knew I was going to end up in this place, but the little things, just like in conflict, the little things in our lives, small twists and turns do end up leading us to the next great thing for all of us. So thank you again for joining us. We're so happy to have had you on the podcast.
Thank you for having us. It was such a lovely conversation.
Thank you for joining us today on the Wear Your Cape to Work podcast, hosted by Project Insight. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, follow, or leave us a comment. If you subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or other favorite podcast channels, you'll receive notifications of all of our new episodes. We'd also love it if you would share Wear Your Cape to Work with your network of PMPs or anyone else who might enjoy the show. Project Insight is an online project and portfolio management software that helps companies connect project data from across all of their teams and software tools so that they can make confident decisions about their business. Our website is projectinsight.com, and there you can find many resources for project professionals, including free PDU webinars, as well as a place to register for a demonstration or a consultation with one of our success teams. Thank you once again for joining today's conversation, and most importantly, thanks for wearing your cape to work.